Guys, so welcome back to our tutorials, and in today's video we are going to talk about how can we create this birthday card that is showing the birthdays of different people using HTML and CSS, and we will sprinkle some JavaScript in such that JavaScript is the one that is going to load these birthdays, but we are going to use dummy data. So let's get started. So I have my HTML here, and then I have two more files, the script.js and the style.css. So the first thing I want to do is to link them up. So I'm going to link the CSS, style.css. This corresponds to the style.css file name. And then let's link the JavaScript at the bottom. So we can say script, and then source, then script.js. And then the next thing is that we need to add some default styles for CSS. So the first thing is that there's a font I want to load. So just paste that font there. I showed you how you can load these fonts from Google Fonts in my previous videos. So this is very simple. Just go to Google Fonts, look for the font you want, embed, and look for this, the CSS import URL. The next thing is to add the defaults. So the margin 0 on every element, a padding of 0 as well, and box sizing, border box, right? These are just default HTML. And then let's go live, and so that we can see what we are working with. So I showed you also how to go live using the live server extension. So I hope that's okay. The next thing is that I want to style the body, and add a background color. And the color I'm interested in is #FF94BD. It's a pinkish color. So if I save, you can see the body changes. And then the font family, let's specify the font family. So the font family is what you can see here on top. It's called Quicksand. You just copy that name. And then you come here and paste it. And then as a fallback, you add sans serif or the fallback font that you want. But sans serif is a normal one. All right. So the next thing is, let's go back and start creating this card. I'm just going to create a div with a class of card. And then inside this div, you can see we don't have a lot going on. So we have a heading. I can use a HU and say 24 birthdays day. That's the heading. And then let me create the button next. So I can say button btn, and then this one is view all. Right, those two. The next thing is that I'm going to create the card itself just for one person, just to show you how it will look like. So let's go back here. You can see it here on top. The next thing is to give the card some styles. So this card has a background color of white. So that's what we are going to also give our new card. So we can say card background color of white. Also, let's give it a width. You can see it is spanning the full width. So we can say width of maybe 300 pixels. All right. And then something else is that we want this card to be in the middle of the page. So we go back to the body and say display flex, then justify content center. And also, if you wanted it to be here in the middle, you could align item center. Let me show you. Let's say align item center. But in our case, okay, and then you can give this a height of 100 viewport height. Then you can see it is in the middle, but that's not what we want. So let's remove all these. And then something else is that the body, you can see the card is too close to the edges. Let's give some padding to the body. We can say padding maybe to them. And then you can see the card looks nice. The next thing is that this card, you can see the text and the content are too close to the edges. Let's add some padding. We're going to do a padding of maybe 1 rem in that. Then you can see now the card looks more closer to what we had. The next thing is that you can see the edges are too sharp. So we can add a border radius. And we can add a border radius of maybe 5 pixels. And then you can see it there. The next thing is that you can see the finished version has some box shadow. You can see there's a shadow going all around. So we can create that shadow, and the syntax for creating a box shadow, let me show you. You can go to box shadow syntax. So the box shadow syntax looks, let me go to W3 or MDN. Let's go here. So the box shadow syntax, we want the syntax. So we have the horizontal offset, the vertical offset, the blur, the spread, the color, all these. Some of them are optional, like the blur, the spread, all these. But also you could use some tools to generate box shadow. So box shadow generator. So you can look for these projects like this one that generates box shadows. So you can see now this is a box shadow. Okay, I can add the horizontal. You can see it showing at the bottom. So there is a syntax for the box shadow. So I'm just going to type out the one that I generated. So the box shadow, we start with the horizontal offset is 7 pixels. And then the vertical offset is 4 pixels. And 154 pixels, 0. And then let's add maybe red so that we can be able to see what we are working with. So, right, you can see the red color. So the reason I added red is because I want us to experiment and see what each of these does. I think this is the blur. So let's see the box shadow. This is the horizontal. So if we do maybe -70, you can see the horizontal offset going. So let me remove the blur. I think this is the blur. So we can do a blur of maybe 5. All right. So yeah, that was the blur. So we have the horizontal offset. This is the offset from the card. So when you are doing the offset, if you do the negative, it goes this side. If you do the positive, it goes the other side. So if I remove that, think of it as a Cartesian grid whereby you have here it starts at 0, then minus, and then positive. Just think of it like that. And then we can also, let me return the -70. Then this one is the vertical offset. This is 4 pixels going down, or you can do 4 pixels going up. Let's do 40, something huge that is easier to see. You can see now we are offsetting from this point. We are going down 40 pixels. We could go up by using the negative, and then that one will go push it down. So you can see how you can play around with the box shadow to come up with the best box shadow for yourself. But now let's do a 4 pixels here. And then for the blur, you can go as high as you want. This is the box shadow I have. So this 4 pixels is not negative. So, okay. Then this one is not 70. This one is 7. You can see now the shadow looks nice, but we don't want this color. I have a color predefined, so I'll use RGBA. And then the red is 0. The green is 0. The blue is 0. The blue is 0. And then the alpha or the opacity is 0.3. And then now you can see that smooth box shadow in the beneath it. So that's it for the box shadow. The next thing is this one will come in hand when we add the card. So let's add it. So we are going to add something called the profile. Let's create a div with a class of profile.profile. And then inside the profile, I'm going to create an image. And then in the image, the source I'm going to use. So for the source, I'm going to use the pick avatars. So let me show you the syntax. So paste. So this i.pravatar.cc, you can now pass different images based on the image you want. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is just a placeholder image. It's nothing more fancy. You can go ahead and look at this URL. And if we click on this URL, and this is an avatar. If we change here to 2, you get a new avatar like that. And that's what we are going to utilize in this tutorial. So the image has been added, but it is too huge. The image is too huge. We need to give it some width. So we are just going to clip it here without having to use the CSS. So I'm just going to clip it to 50. Then you can see now it respects what I want it to do. The next thing is now inside the profile, after the image, you want to have, this is the profile I'm talking about this. So you can see it has the image and has the profile content, which is the title and the years. So let's create the title. So we can use a H4 and say John Doe. All right. And then if you go back, you can see it here on the bottom. And then finally, let's create a paragraph tag, which will hold the age. Let's say 30 years for this person. That's it. Then let's go ahead and style this profile card to look exactly as this profile card we do have here. So the first thing is to display the profile flex. So we can say dot profile and then display flex. In that they'll be side by side. You can see it like that. All right. And then we can align these items to the center. So we can say align items to the center. Then the image and this content is aligned. And then finally, let's add a gap of maybe 0.3 rem on these items because they were too close to each other. Okay, so, and something I forgot is that inside the profile card, we need to create these two inside a div. So you can say div like that. And then you can see them now, they are well aligned. So the next thing is now the image needs to be rounded like this one. So we can target the image by saying the dot profile and then we grab the image. So we can say dot profile and then image. And then this we are going to say border radius of 50%. Then you can see it is rounded. So the next thing I want to style is this paragraph, this P, 30 years. You can see the finished version. This one is a bit small and it is faded away. So you can say dot profile, then grab the P and then we can say, we can give it a grayish color. So we can do #33. That's a grayish color. You can see it and then you can reduce the font size to maybe 0.7 rem there. That one is a bit small, so let's do 0.8 rem. So let's see. Right, that looks a bit nice. Let's add a font weight to the same. So we can say font weight of 500. That's more or less semi-bold or something. So that's it. It looks a bit nice. I think we can stick to that. So the next thing that we need to work on is this button. The next thing you can see also is that these three items are so squeezed together. These are all children of the card div, so the profile and the button. So we can go to the card and give some gaps. So the first thing for us to work with gaps is we display this flex and flex direction of column. And now let's grab the gap and do a gap of, we can do maybe almost 1 rem. So let's do 0.7 rem. That looks a bit nice. And then let's start styling the button. So to style the button, you just select the button and then let's add a padding to the button. You have to experiment with this padding and come with the best padding for yourself. But this is what I found that was working real well. But I think now this one is a bit huge. So, but let's remove the border on the button. So we can say border none. All right, let's do vertical. Let's do 0.6. I think that's okay. And then let's add some border radius to the button. And then the border radius will be 5 pixels. All right, next up is on the cursor. Let's the cursor be pointer, the button. Okay, that looks a bit nice. And then the background color, I'm going to use a gradient. So background color, let's use a linear gradient. let's not do the background color. You need to do the background. You do linear gradient, and the syntax for the linear gradient is, first of all, we have tools to help generate gradients. All right, let me show you gradient generator. You can even see some reasons my internet is gone. So I'll just show you the syntax because I don't need internet to. Let me see. It's showing. So you can go to the linear CSS gradients.io and then you add your colors and tweak this manually. So the color I want is, you first select you want linear here. And the colors I want is, let me remove this. So the first color I want, so this tool is also not responsive. All right, I'll just show you, but you can go ahead and play around with this and it will give you a gradient that you can work with. So what I'm going to do for the linear gradient, the first one, we specify the rotation. So for instance, I want 90 degrees. And then from which color to which color and from which instance. So the first color I'm going to work with is RGBA. And then this one will be 254, 105, 163. Okay, I don't need to use RGB. I can use RGB because I can see the alpha is also. And then specify where does this start, right? And then you create the next one. So RGB. And then this one will be 229, 109, 209. And then this one will go up to 100. And then CSS is quite smart enough to know that this color is starting from 0. You're starting from 0, and then in the middle it is going to match this. You can also add another color here. You can say RGB and say 000. And then this one will be at 50%. So let's do 50%. And then you can see what I'm talking about is that this, you have to specify from which color are you starting on and from which degree do you want it to start. So if I do 180 degree here, you can see now it starts from top to bottom. So you specify the rotation. So this one is 90 degrees. And then which color are you starting with and where are you starting with? And then CSS is quite clever enough to know that it is going to match at which, because from RGB 0% to 50%, at around 25%, it is going to mix match these colors. If I don't use the next color, it is going at 50%, around 50%, it's going to match these colors. And this is what has happened. So let's continue and then give a color of white here. And then, yeah, that looks a bit nice. The border radius, we didn't add the border radius. I can see the border is very sharp. So you can say border and then border radius. And then let's do 5 pixels. I think I don't have internet. That's why this is behaving. And then I want, whenever we hover over this button, I want us to change the rotation of this. So I'm going to grab and say button, and then the hover state, I just want to change the color. So I'll say background. So I'm going to grab this background and say linear gradient. It is still have to be 90 degrees, but I'm going to switch the colors. So this one will start and this one will end. So I can just copy these two. And then grab these, paste it on top. And then let's start at 0. And then the other color ends at 100. So you're just switching the colors. Then you save. And now if I hover, it's not quite visible. So we didn't add a comma here. So if I hover over this now, if you are concentrating enough, you can see it changing. So we are done with the cars. The next thing is to populate the data using JavaScript. So let's close the CSS and go to the JavaScript. And what I want you to do is that I'm going to copy some users. So this is the data I want you to create. I showed you the link to the profile. I want you to create some users and then give it a name, age, and the DP. And then you can use this i.pravatar.cc / the size of the image, and then you can start 1, 2, 3. Create your own users, and then let's continue. So the next thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to cut this profile because I want to fit some new profiles using JavaScript inside here. I'm going to cut that and create another div and call it .slot. So this slot is where JavaScript will draw in the users we just created. So this is the slot. And then let's go to the script. The first thing we need access to is the slot itself. So I can even get it here. So I can say const slot equals to document.query selector, and then we can grab the .slot. We are just getting a reference to that slot div so that we can use JavaScript. We can use JavaScript to inject. We can use JavaScript to inject the new data inside here. I hope you can understand. We are just getting access to this and then we can fill some data. That's why I did have to cut the profile, because that profile will be recreated by JavaScript. All right. And then we are going to create a function and call it setup profiles. And then what this profile do is that we are going to create a variable called profile data, and it will be an empty string to begin with. And then we are going to loop over the users. You saw the syntax of the users. So we are going to loop over the users. And then we grab each user and then we construct a new user and inject it back to the profile data. So we are going to do profile data. Then we add the new data that we are going to add. But the data we are going to add will be a formulated profile. You can see I have pasted my profile. This will be a formulated profile. That's meaning that each user, you saw the syntax of the user. A user has a DP, has an age, and has a name. So that means whenever we loop over these users and creating a new string, we are going to inject the user's DP inside the source. So you can say user.dp, and then we inject the user's name here. We can say user, not service worker. So you can say user.name. And then let's inject the years. So you can just do, I don't know whether it has, it is just a number. So you can just inject this. So you can say user.age. So what are we doing? We are looping over the users, creating some strings. These are strings of this profile. And then from this profile, each user will have its own profile. And then we are going to inject this profile into the slot. So then we do slot.innerHTML. Slot.innerHTML. Now we are not going to use the text content. We are going to inject HTML because this is HTML. All right. And then inner HTML will be equals to the new profile data. At the end of the loop, this profile data will have so many profiles, which is just the HTML. And then we save that. The next thing is that we need to call this function. So we can do setup profile and we call it. All right. But now there's a simpler syntax. Instead of doing all this, you can create a function called immediately invoked function, whereby you wrap the function inside some parentheses and then call it. Simple as that. This is called immediately invoked function, IFI. I think something like that. Immediately invoked function expression, something of that sort. This function will be called immediately when this file loads. And then if we save here, so I think I don't have internet access right now. So, So let's see. Do I have internet access? All right. So I have no internet access, but that's it for the tutorial. I think the internet is back. So So okay, you can see that now the cards have been added. And then finally, let's go to the CSS. So the CSS, we grab the slot and then we style the slot. We display it flex. So we can say now here dot slot and then display flex direction of column. And then let's give some gap of maybe 0.7 rem. And that's it, guys. That's how you create this card. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about that? Did you understand? And like, follow, and share with your friends. Thank you.